This is the most intense comeback of the action-packed franchise in a decade, with John Wick Chapter 4 unanimously praised as incredibly fun, thrilling, and impressive. The story continues from the previous installment, as John Wick returns to the world of assassins after breaking the important rules of the organization, resulting in a bounty on his head as a warning to others. But John refuses to succumb to his fate and fights back relentlessly, almost losing his life. Fortunately, some people still support him behind the scenes. Now, it's time for the High Council of the Assassin world to get serious and finish John Wick once and for all in this movie. The film begins with John Wick training intensely after being hunted by the High Council in the previous installment. In the past, John's rampage almost destroyed everything the High Council had built, all because of a single dog. Luckily, he was saved by the king, the leader of the Homeless Association, who helped him survive his darkest moments. Now, it's time for John to take revenge on the High Council members who have been after him from the beginning. He wastes no time, riding his beloved horse through the desert to hunt down the council members one by one. In the end, only the big boss remains, who warns John that his actions are futile, as even if he dies, the other High Council members will send someone else to take his place and continue hunting John. But our hero retorts that at least he'll have peace of mind and pulls the trigger, ending the story. With the High Council members in the desert eliminated, the remaining ones don't remain idle. They appoint a Frenchman named Mark to take control of the High Council and continue the pursuit of John Wick. Mark, with his newfound power, sends his heavily armed forces to the Continental Hotel in New York to order Winston, the hotel owner, that the establishment is now officially closed. Winston is given one last hour to evacuate all belongings from the hotel and prepare to face judgment for his past collusion with John Wick. Even though Winston had made amends with the High Table, it was clear that he had fully betrayed John Wick in the previous installment to prove his loyalty. However, it was obvious that John could not be stopped. Therefore, Winston's punishment was to send his most loyal assistant, Karen, to speak with the mango tree root, which he willingly accepted, bringing an end to the Continental Hotel saga officially. Before the scene cuts to Paris, France, a blind man named Ken is staring at an Asian woman playing music on the street. At that time, Ken is privately invited by the High Table to receive a new mission to hunt down John Wick. Ken firmly states that he has retired and will not accept the job because John is his old friend. However, the High Table brings up Ken's daughter and claims that they control her life. If Ken refuses the job, her life will not end well. With no other choice, Ken accepts the mission and informs the High Table that he knows where John might be because John has only a few friends left to rely on. Meanwhile, the bounty on John's head has skyrocketed to $18 million. The scene shifts to Japan, at the Continental Hotel in Osaka, which is still open and welcoming to regular hunters. Okara, the daughter of Koji, the owner of the hotel and John's close friend, warns Koji that what happened to the Continental in New York could happen to them too because her father is an old friend who is very close to John. Surprisingly, Koji does not seem worried at all, and even secretly welcomes John warmly. Okara doesn't understand her father's behavior, but that's because Koji and John have been true friends since the old days. Even if the hotel were to burn down, Koji is ready to fight alongside John. The result was as expected. For the sake of the council's satisfaction, the group led by Marky surrounded the Continental Hotel here, ordering Koji to hand over John or face the same fate as Winston. However, Koji showed no intention of complying. He ordered all of his subordinates to launch a full-scale attack on Marky's forces before commanding an urgent evacuation from the hotel. Of course, Ken was also part of Marky's group and was ready to follow every order from Marky for his daughter's safety, even though it meant fighting against his old friend. This meant that Koji, John, and Ken were all once close professional friends, but Ken couldn't truly defy Marky's orders. As the chaos unfolded, The scene shifted to an unnamed African-American bounty hunter, who I'll refer to as Mr. Unimportant for simplicity. Accompanied by his loyal dog, he watched everything happening at the hotel and came up with an idea. After some time, both sides had lost a significant number of forces, leaving only the most skilled to continue fighting. Koji ordered John to escape while he covered him with the help of his daughter Akira. Naturally, John had to face his old friend Ken, the blind master fighter, whose skills were so great that Daredevil could call him Dad. John and Ken knew each other very well, and their fight was intense until Mr. Unimportant and his dog intervened, allowing John to successfully evade Ken. Mr. Unimportant also warned John to take better care of himself next time, as his bounty was Mr. Unimportant's income. Confused, John wondered who this man could be. At this point, John's bounty had risen to a staggering $20 million. This situation left Ken with no choice but to side with Koji and his daughter. Koji used every technique he knew to fight against Ken to protect his injured daughter, Akira. Despite his efforts, Ken eventually managed to capture Koji. This made Akira hold a grudge against Ken with all her heart. After the battle, John met with Winston, who had come to pay his respects to the loss of his close friend, the Continental Hotel's manager. John wanted to know who Marky was and vowed to take revenge himself. Winston warned him that revenge was not the answer and wouldn't change anything. The High Table then sent another assassin after John, so Winston suggested an old tradition among the assassins, the bow ran right, that could potentially free John from the High Table's control. It involved a duel where the winner would be released from their obligations to the High Table. However, the participants needed to belong to a specific family lineage. The problem was that John didn't belong to any such lineage. His only option was to return to the Roscaroma, his original family where he grew up but had long been estranged from. To proceed with this plan, John needed the Roscaroma to accept him back into their ranks. Meanwhile, Mr. Unimportant tried to negotiate directly with Marky, offering to take care of the John Wick situation if the bounty were increased significantly, such as raising the price on John's head to $23 million. However, Marky felt that Mr. Unimportant was asking for too much and showed little interest in this proposal. Currently, John's side is under the control of the Roman Rusqua, who immediately brought him to trial because of what John had done in the pursuit of the High Council. It caused the former leader of this place, named Pate, to be arrested. John's only way to atone for his mistakes is to talk to the mango tree roots. Eventually, John mentioned the ancient tradition of dueling, which attracted Ruskay's attention greatly. Because if John could defeat the High Council, all honor would be restored. Ruska really wanted it and made an offer to John to capture one of the High Council members who had captured Pate before. Then John would return to Ruskay's family and be able to participate in the duel according to the rules. John didn't hesitate to accept the offer. He immediately went to find this High Council member, and that's when John met Ken and the insignificant person here. Their individual objectives were clear. It was John's life at stake. However, what John wanted was the life of the High Council member in order to participate in the duel. A fight broke out, and Ken and the insignificant person secretly helped John deal with the High Council member's underlings, fearing that John would be taken away prematurely. Eventually, John managed to defeat the High Council member, but it was apparent that our protagonist had incredible fighting skills. The High Council member was no match for the hero. Due to the disagreement between Ken and the insignificant person, they had to let John go first so they could find an opportunity to capture John themselves. After completing this task, John was officially welcomed back into Ruskay's family to secure his status and receive the invitation to the duel to be sent to the other side, McGee. Of course, John's assistant was none other than Winston himself, who would handle everything on John's behalf, including sending McGee the invitation to accept John's challenge. McGee had the right to reject this challenge, but Winston persuaded McGee that if they could capture John after accepting the challenge, their future prospects would be limitless, gaining a reputation for dealing with the most disruptive hunter in the association. On the other hand, if John's side were to lose, it would be the end for both John and his assistant, Winston. Right away, this proposal seems incredibly appealing to WICK because he thinks that if he accepts this challenge and manages to kill John before the duel begins, he wins. And even if he misses the first opportunity, there's still a chance in the second duel. Anyway, John probably won't have good luck to survive both rounds. So WICK immediately arranges a meeting with a High Council member to invoke the ancient rule of dueling to determine the terms of the upcoming duel. The negotiations for the duel begin, and each side chooses their scoring cards to pick the conditions they want. In the end, it is agreed that the duel will take place at dawn the next day, with handguns as the weapons, and the location will be an old warehouse in the heart of Paris. The terms demanded by John's side for victory are complete freedom from all high table obligations, and Winston gets his hotel back with the high table covering all repair expenses. Most importantly, there can only be one survivor in this contest, either WICK or John. Of course, WICK does not dare to participate in the duel himself, as he is not skilled in combat. So he orders Ken to be his representative in the duel. Ken has to do it because his daughter's life is at stake. WICK's sister warns him, asking why he would risk his life like this, and trusting it to a blind man. WICK then reveals something that Ken is fighting for someone else, while John is just looking for a way to go down. It's clear that John has no chance of defeating Ken. And besides, do you think John will survive the night? WICK continues to inject more prize money into John WICK's bounty, which has now reached $26 million. The city's bounty hunters are all wide-eyed, eager to claim this prize for themselves. John knew that in just a few minutes, he would face a significant challenge. He had until dawn to reach the old warehouse, and as he embarked on this new journey through the heart of Paris, hundreds of bounty hunters were determined to send him to an early grave. Each of them waged a fierce battle in the city center, not caring about the destruction and chaos they caused. Throughout the city, the devastation was immense. John, single-handedly, had to overcome all obstacles to reach the warehouse. It was far from easy. He had to fight off independent hunters, Winston's men, and even random people who wanted to join the fray. However, he still couldn't settle on a price with Winston, who was quite confident that John wouldn't make it to the warehouse alive with so many hunters in the city. When the random people didn't get what they wanted, they sometimes helped John in his fights to improve their negotiation position. As a result, they hoped for a better chance of getting a satisfactory price. At this point, John had traveled almost 60% of the way, and no one had managed to stop him. Winston's bounty kept increasing, and the random people tried to negotiate again. They were very close to John and asked for $35 million this time. It was a ridiculously high price, and they hung up on Winston. Prepared to call Winston again after John had traveled 80% of the way, the random people now demanded $40 million to help John. Winston, starting to sweat, couldn't believe that no one had been able to stop John yet. With hundreds of hunters on his tail, how good could he be? Reluctantly, Winston agreed to the $40 million, just to see John taken down. It was time for the random people to get serious, and they threw everything they had at John, from their loyal dogs to their most advanced weapons. They almost managed to take John down, but one of Winston's men intervened, disrupting their plans. John turned the tables and defeated the random people, about to capture them. At that moment, however, the random person's dog was in danger, and John chose to shoot the dog's attacker before quickly fleeing to continue his journey. It made people who seemed unimportant become astonished by what John did, saving a dog instead of keeping the money. Now, John WICK was only a few hundred steps away from the door to the boss's room above. It could be said that the path in front of him was filled with the greed and madness of each hunter, hoping to stop John tonight. Even the protagonist himself was almost successful, but he was kicked down the stairs and had to climb all the way back up. It made John think that he had less than 3 minutes left, and there was no way he could make it. Suddenly, Keanu appeared, lifting John from the ground and telling the protagonist, "We'll make it before the sun rises." With that, the protagonist gathered his strength and continued his journey to the boss's room. The seemingly unimportant person became another force that pushed John to achieve his dream, as a way to repay the protagonist for saving his dog's life. Eventually, John and Keanu successfully reached the duel arena, and the High Council didn't waste any time announcing the start of the duel between John and Keanu. Among the many witnesses, there were Mickey and Winston, who had to accept the consequences. The rules of this duel were simple. Both the protagonist and Keanu would receive a single-shot pistol and 1 bullet each. They would shoot at each other from a distance of 30 steps. If neither side was hit, they would move closer until one party fell, ending the duel. Importantly, wearing armor was strictly forbidden. The first round began at a distance of 30 steps. Both Keanu and the protagonist hit each other's arms. According to the rules, they had to move closer for the second round. Then it happened. John was hit in the shoulder while Keanu was shot in the stomach. However, both were still standing. Ready for the third round, they moved even closer. At this point, Winston wanted to tell John to get serious as he wouldn't be able to take it anymore. As the third round began, before the protagonist could pull the trigger, Keanu took advantage and shot John in the stomach, causing him to fall to the ground. In this condition, John couldn't fire another shot because he was severely injured. So it made people less important, and they were shocked by what John did. He helped a dog instead of collecting it. At this moment, John Wick is just a few hundred steps away from reaching the top boss's door. It could be said that in front of him is filled with the greed and madness of each hunter, hoping to stop John tonight. Even the protagonist himself is almost successful, but he was kicked down the stairs and had to start climbing all over again. This made John think that with less than 3 minutes left, he would not make it for sure. Suddenly, Ken appeared, pulling John up from the ground and telling the protagonist, "We will make it in time before dawn." With that, the protagonist regained his determination, trying his best to reach the top boss. With the help of the unimportant person, John managed to reach his dream as a way to repay the protagonist for saving his dog's life. Finally, both John and Ken successfully reached the duel arena. The High Council did not hesitate to announce the start of the duel between John and Ken, with many witnesses, including Mickey and Winston, who had to accept the consequences. The rules of this duel were not difficult. Both sides, the protagonist and Ken, would receive a pistol with 1 bullet each, and they would shoot at each other from 30 steps away. If neither side was hit, they would continue to approach each other until one of them fell, ending the duel. Importantly, no one was allowed to wear armor. In the first round, both the protagonist and Ken shot each other in the arm from 30 steps away. According to the rules, they had to approach each other for the second round. Then, there was a loud bang. John was shot in the shoulder, while Ken was hit in the stomach, but both were still standing. Before the third round, they approached each other even closer. Winston wanted to tell John to get serious because he couldn't take it anymore. Just as the protagonist was about to pull the trigger for the third round, Ken took the opportunity to shoot the protagonist in the stomach, causing him to fall to the ground, unable to shoot anymore due to his severe injuries. Seeing this, Mickey was almost overjoyed. "Well done, John. I thought you would be finished." Mickey then decided to ask the competition committee if he could be the one to shoot the final round himself, so they could finish the job in style. With Ken's assurance that his daughter was now free, he agreed to let Mickey take the final shot. He prepared the pistol, loaded the bullet, and got ready for the last shot to end this. The committee and Winston were shocked, telling Mickey that he couldn't shoot yet because John's third bullet had not been fired yet. Mickey was confused, but then a gunshot rang out. John's third bullet flew through Mickey's chest, causing him to fall to the ground, ending the duel officially. John Wick was free from all obligations to the High Council. Ken would regain his freedom along with his daughter, and Winston would regain ownership of the Continental Hotel in New York and build a new hotel. Before collapsing from his injuries, John asked Winston to take him home. John fell to the ground in a weakened state, his body battered from the fight and with 3 bullets lodged inside him. In another scene, Winston and King stood in front of John Wick's grave, having successfully sent his soul to rest in peace. And that's where the movie ended. For the end credit scene of this movie, let's continue to watch together. The scene in question is a post-credit scene that takes place at the very end of the film. In this scene, you will see the atmosphere of London at night, with the sound of a street musician playing her music in public. Then, you will meet Ken, played by Donnie Yen, who is dressed handsomely and elegantly, holding a bouquet of beautiful hydrangea flowers in his hand. Ken is heading towards a young woman who is playing live music outdoors, presumably his daughter who has been freed from her obligations and hostage situation under Marquis de Gramont. However, Akira, played by Rina Sawayama, appears, dressed in concealing clothes, with a face full of anger and resentment. She silently walks towards Ken before the camera focuses on her hand, revealing that she is holding a concealed knife. And with that, the scene comes to an end.